you hopefully all know, the documentary follows the fight of the indigenous, and I get this right, Uru-eu-wau-wau people against the encroachment and deforestation by farmers and illegal settlers in the Brazilian Amazon. I think one thing that was, amazing to see on such a big documentary that was on Nat Geo was that it was a collaboration and partly shot by the community themselves. So I guess straight over to you, Lizzie. It'd be really good to give us an introduction to yourself, how the film came about and how you came to be involved in the film.
Of course, it's really nice to meet all of you on Zoom. And if you want to turn your cameras on, that's nice, and we can see you, but obviously don't if you're cooking in the background or you can't turn your camera on for whatever reason. My name's Lizzie, as Isabel said, and I am a feature doc producer. I come from New Zealand, and I have been kind of trying to do this for a very long time, but as many of you probably know, it's hard to get your first break, and I came from New Zealand, no one had heard of anything, so I applied for 300 jobs in 1 year and took a long windy road to get here. I actually did a film 12 years ago called The Age of Stupid, which I don't know if anybody's seen The Age of Stupid. It's quite old now, but it was the first kind of big crowd-funded film. We raised $1 million from ordinary people for a film about climate change, which was made entirely independently, and then we got 2 Guinness World Records for our big premiere. So that kind of gave me like a real sense of what's possible when you don't go down the commissioning route. And I've hardly ever done a commissioned film. I've actually only done two now. And even in those instances, one of them was multi-funded. So it was the CNN, BBC, and then a deficit financier. So I've only done one film where it was actually for a commissioner. And I guess what I love about making films independently is that if you have the right team, you can do exactly what you think is right, and you can go down those storylines that might be too radical if, the BBC was funding it, or if Nat Geo, in fact, had come on at the beginning. You can spend 2 years talking to an Indigenous community about participatory filmmaking before you, have anything to show, and those are the kind of things you can do. So that's a little bit about me. I work here at Passion currently. I finished 3 films last year. The Territory was one of them, and I have 3 more in production now. The other 2 that I finished, one is called Merkel, about Angela Merkel, the former German Chancellor, and that we made it entirely independently, and we sold it to Netflix. It's on Netflix now. Hi, Archie. See Archie there? So the Territory was going for 2 years before I got involved. And it came about because Alex Pritz, the director, saw what Trump had done in America to environmental activists and kind of had this inkling that if Bolsonaro was elected, there was going to be something similar happening in Brazil. So he actually started before Bolsonaro was elected, and he got in touch with Najinha, who's in the film, the female activist who works a lot with the Indigenous community, and said, what story could we be covering? Could we follow you? And immediately she said, you should work with this one community, the Uru-eu-wau-wau. And Alex went and, of course, immediately realized they didn't know what a film was. Some of them had mobile phones and internet was slowly coming to the village, but they hadn't seen images edited together. So Gabriel, who's the Brazilian producer, and Alex and Will started this process of participatory filmmaking workshops, and they showed the community what it's like to film an image, and when you put them together, if you film from high up or down low, how that makes people look and how you can manipulate the story or the truth. And then that became a long conversation about making a film together. And the way that things work in this community is that they are consensus based, and that there's always discussion, and that you may have an agreement, but things have to be continually agreed. So it's not a normal kind of access arrangement that you would have on some other feature docs. And so when I met them, the filmmakers, they had been doing it for 2 years. They had run out of money, funnily enough. They had these amazing, they had shot some stuff which was amazing. They had a really clear idea of what the story would be. But they'd kind of hit a brick wall because of the $1 million budget that they knew was needed to really deliver the film. They'd raised and spent $250, and they were spending their own credit cards trying to pay people on the ground. not being paid themselves, and so they were all kind of hustling and doing side things. And I met them through, I don't know if any of you have been to Sheffield Documentary, but they run a thing called Meat Market. And basically it's like speed dating. And so I met 25 film teams in 2 days, and I just thought this proposition was brilliant. And Alex and Will had this idea of not pitching any buyers at all, not showing the film to Netflix, and instead raising all the money independently and making the film they wanted and then selling it later. Everybody wants to do that, but very, very few people have, I think, what it takes and have a project that justifies that. And so I really decided to back them, and I brought Passion Pictures on board. Darren Aronofsky was also on board as a creative producer, and we set about raising the money. I don't know if any of you have read, I did a broadcast article about it, but it was about a year. And all the meanwhile, they were still filming, they were still losing money, still not being paid. But it took us about a year, and we lined up the rest of the money. So another $250 in grants and $500,000 in equity investments in the film, which we brought all together on the same terms on the same day. And by the time we'd done that, you know, we were in the edit, and then we got into Sundance, and everything changed, because we always felt we had a very powerful film, but we got into Sundance, and then everybody wanted to see the film, and we had a big huddle and decided that Nat Geo was our preferred partner, and we wouldn't show it to anyone but them if we could get the number that we wanted. And so we showed it to them, they made us an offer, and we increased the offer. We kind of discussed it, and it went up, because as much of the profits that go to the production companies go to the Indigenous community. And it was a very long film, and there's lots of participants, and we knew that it would be a long awards campaign. So we argued that Nat Geo should go up. And so in the end, we didn't show it to Netflix or anybody. Nat Geo bought it, and we knew that they were the right partners for it. There's lots of reasons why Nat Geo were the right partners, which I can get into if people are interested. And then we had this mad year of release. You know, we won the audience and the craft awards at Sundance. We played 150 film festivals. We had a 2,000 person premiere in Central Park in the middle of the trees. They brought the Brazilian participants everywhere, you know, to Copenhagen, to Cannes, to all the different festivals all across America. And wherever possible, we elevated the Indigenous voices who were in the film, who helped make the film. And it's just been a huge change for a lot of people involved in the film. And now it's on Disney Plus, and we were Oscar shortlisted. We won lots of awards, and we've got this incredible impact campaign, which maybe I can go into a bit later on. But that's the basic overview. So I don't know if people have got specific questions that they kind of want to know more about. If you have a question, put your hand up. Otherwise, I will keep rabbiting on. That's a threat. Yes, Yvonne.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for joining today. I was just at CPH Doc, and I saw your other film, Miracle. It's really cool. My question is more directed towards the impact campaign. Did you have like an impact producer on board, specifically like assigned to this project, or how was like the process of managing that with all the other producers? And did you design that starting from like development or until you were in post-production? Like, how did that look like for you?
That's a really good question. Well, Alex and Will and Gabriel, who were the three main producers doing it like every day, from the very start, it was a film that was so much about impact. It was as much about the film as it was about the impact. So they were always thinking about that right from the start. And so they always had impact in mind, but there was no budget for it. But so when I was raising money for them, they had written a very comprehensive impact plan, and they submitted it to the Doc Society Climate Fund, and they were selected. They were successful. Sorry, I should have said that. That was $100,000. And that process is pretty intense. And the plan they wrote, you know, it was 60 pages long. It was so brilliant because it was both achievable, ambitious, you know, detailed, but yet also succinct in its overview. And they did that, you know, in collaboration with the community in terms of what did the community want. And then once we had some money, both from Doc Society and from Luminate, who were one of our biggest funders, we hired a global impact producer called Marianne Ollinger, and she's Brazilian and speaks Portuguese. And one of her biggest jobs was massive stakeholder engagement. So I think there was 100 partner organizations, from Amazon Watch to Greenpeace to local small Indigenous organizations. So firstly, seeing what everybody's doing and not kind of just starting a new impact campaign for the sake of it. And she designed the strategy for the impact campaign, which is really only just getting going now. And it had a number of strands. I can send you, if you're interested, the actual kind of summary, but it was about changing legislation in Europe, building this media center on the ground, which is what they wanted, the community wanted, elevating Indigenous voices, and stopping French supermarkets carrying beef from the Amazon. I think those were the four things. And we also did hire a European impact producer called Think Film, and they did the kind of legislative piece. So working with the EU, working with Brussels, and of course we were all working together. One of the biggest impacts, as always, is getting the film seen. I'm going to bring up some photos now. I'm going to try and share my screen if I can. Let's see if I can. Okay. What is this? I don't know if some of you can see this. This was the screening in Central Park with like 2,000 people and everybody yelling out, "Fora Bolsonaro!" And then we opened in, I think, 200 cinemas. Screen sharing stopped. Oh, done. Okay, what about this one? I don't know, did any of you see this? Let me see if I can. I'm not doing very well with this.
It worked. I saw it.
It worked.
Yes.
Saw it.
Well, I saw it. I don't know about others.
Okay. It's this, it's a 15-story mural of Ari, the land defender, who was killed during the course of us filming. And in their community, once someone dies, they generally don't say their name. You never see a photo of them. And so it was a really incredibly difficult thing for our team and for the film, because firstly, they knew Ari and they were close to him. So that was really sad. And then, of course, the community had lost him, but they had to decide whether to keep filming or not. And they just said it's up to the village and the community. And they decided that they would go against their own tradition and that they would allow Ari's image to be in the film, his name to be spoken. And in fact, then they used his name and his face in this huge billboard campaign across Brazil to bring to light the death of Indigenous land defenders. And this is a 16-story mural that's up in the middle of Sao Paulo. But what I really wanted to show you is, can you see me, what I'm doing on my screen or not?
Not right now.
No, okay, fine. I'm just trying to find impact summary. Okay. Sorry, I had opened these before, but I think they all closed for some reason.
It's the classic Zoom, yeah.
Yeah, that's what, Zoom kind of closes them or something?
Oh no, just a classic Zoom moment when you want to find the thing that you had open before.
Exactly. Okay, right. Let me try. This is like so cool. You wait till you see this. So they wanted us to help build this Indigenous media center in the middle of their kind of the 6 villages, and it's made from wood that was stolen initially by the invaders and then reclaimed by a judge. And then there's this wicked photo. This is the last one I'll show of this is actually an architectural drawing, but you can see, and it's all up and running now. I should get all my photos organized, but I'm really sorry I haven't. So can you see this? It's massive, and it's got like sleeping areas and podcast studios and film editing places and workshop places, and it's now open, and they have a sign, you know, it's their own media center. So that's one of the things that we're proudest of, because I've been in lots of impact campaigns and I value them a lot, but I think sometimes it's hard to see the real world impact from so-called impact documentaries. And so for me, this was, you know, quite a breath of fresh air to see the real deep engagement and the level of participation with the community. Not that I think that that's appropriate for every film, but for this film, it was really important. And the fact that they shared in the profits and that their name is on the film and that it's a co-production of their community and that they made important business decisions and nothing was signed off without them. that's really important. And then this building of a bricks and mortar media center, for me as well, was, you know, you can't be too cynical about that kind of impact. So I don't know if anybody else has got a question. I will send this to you,
Question
Yvonne.
about Joe Hilty.
Thank you.
Hi, Lizzie. Thank you very much for coming, and I love the film. So congratulations. I thought it was a really great example of how collaborative filmmaking can be really impactful. And so I'm just curious to know how the collaborative element of the film continued on into the edit, because I'm aware that's obviously quite tricky and you need a degree of creative licensing and freedom to be able to get things done. So I'm just interested to know how that kind of proceeded, and to what extent it was participatory filmmaking throughout the editing process as well.
Yeah, as you've kind of referred to, so in the filming, the community were using the cameras, and COVID prevented the director going into the community, so they were doing a lot of filming, and there was kind of tutoring by WhatsApp and things. It was much less than the edit. You know, there was sharing of scenes and getting of notes and feelings and things, but the edit happened in New York, unfortunately in COVID, so it was all kind of done remotely. The director and the editor weren't actually together, and the community, and there's all different members of that community, were showing bits and kind of asked for feedback, but they weren't as involved in that as they were in the filming, nor as involved as they were in the promotion, distribution, release of the film, and the impact campaign.
Thank you.
That's cool.
We had a question sent in that
I will read out right now. Sabrina apologizes, she's got a horrible cold, so she didn't want to ask it herself. But she was very interested in you going to Nat Geo as your first choice. And I think a lot of us would love to know a bit more about that, why you decided to work with them.
Well, we knew that this film, if it wasn't handled correctly, could be quite a small film. You know, it could have been like put late at night on a tiny little slot, like it's about Indigenous people in a land far away. It's got subtitles. It's not, without the backing of Nat Geo, like it might feel to you guys like it's a big film. I hope it does. That's because Nat Geo spent a ton of money on it and had a huge team, and that we all committed, you know, a year, some people full-time, some people part-time, to getting it out there. And so we knew that it needed significant resource in terms of its launch and campaign. Weirdly, Nat Geo had a relationship with this community through the magazine many years ago. We also felt like Nat Geo has a long-standing tradition of exploiting Indigenous communities, you know, for the most part. And we felt that this could really open up a genuine but very productive conversation about how we make films and how we show people's images. And we know that Nat Geo only buys a couple of films a year. When it does buy them, it pays a good number. It really treats those films carefully, with a lot of respect and, like I say, resource. And it's really goes gung-ho for all the awards. And we knew that if you get more awards, more people see the film. So it was for all those reasons. And one of my colleagues, who's a producer, had done another film with Nat Geo 3 or 4 years ago, and just had this incredible experience getting them. It was called The Cave. It was about a hospital in Syria. And Darren Aronofsky, who's also on the film, has a first look deal with Nat Geo. So he, of course, wanted to work with them. So we kind of, between us, agreed that Nat Geo, I don't really want to get into too many specifics, but any other partner would have to pay, we kind of put a number on it, a certain amount more for it to be a viable option as compared to Nat Geo, because of all the other things that we knew that they would bring to the film. And they totally delivered. I cannot tell you, like, you come on these calls, the very first call, I think it was 2 or 3 hours long, and they just listened about the Indigenous community. They wanted, this is the top bosses, they just wanted to understand. They read all the things we sent them, and they treated that relationship and that community with so much respect and care over the course of a year. And, you know, it's expensive. If you're flying, like for one of the festivals, they flew 15 people, 7 are from Brazil, business class to Copenhagen, and put them up, they're putting everybody up in these proper hotels, because if they do something, they do it properly. and like a 2,000 person premiere in Central Park, that's expensive, right? We had tube posters across all of central London for a film about the Amazon. I mean, for me, because I come from, you know, a filmmaking world, but also just, I used to be an activist, and all we wanted to do was get the message out there. So to have tube posters of this film about rainforest destruction in the Amazon, and we were, you know, we were on the front page of so many papers, and New York Times, LA Times, it's just unbelievable visibility.
But I had another question we've got sent in. It's from Livy Penman, who couldn't make it. It feels quite a good move on from this. Livy wonders if you guys as the filmmakers think the movie is paving the way for future docs to be made more collaboratively in the way this was. And I think I might just add on the end of that, whether you had any conversations with Nat Geo, whether that felt like anything changed, or whether they're open to that, and whether there was, yeah, I
think that it felt quite landmark in terms of the conversations that it started, and I've been like pretty much inundated with people getting in contact saying, you know, they're so inspired, they hadn't really heard of a film that had gone this far. Like, I know lots of people have had participants involved before, but maybe not to this extent. And that was actually a huge selling point about the film to Nat Geo, and it goes back to making the film independently. Like, if we had made this as a commission for Nat Geo, we just wouldn't have had that length of time and that relationship and that freedom. And so in a way, they were buying the final result of something. They were buying into that deep authenticity, deep, genuine relationship. And that ironically, that pushed the value up, because then also they can see that it's been done. Like, how many independent films do we all know about that you try and do it in a really good way and then it never gets finished? So it was kind of a bet on Nat Geo's part. Are there other films that are going to be like this? Yes, definitely. I know lots of people, you know, have been really inspired and are doing all sorts of things in this area. I guess me personally, I don't think every film has to have like a deep relationship with the participants. This film did, and I think it's part of the kind of the style of the film, the aesthetic of the film, the theme of the film, the story of the film, the relationship. But I really don't think every film, and I think probably only 1 in 3 or 4 films, or even less, is appropriate to have that level of input. You know, made a film about Jackie Collins, you're not going to have, it's just not appropriate. It's in a way, it's about power as well, and who has power in what relationships. And if you're making a film about a very kind of traditionally powerful person, it wouldn't be appropriate for them to, you know, get all the profits and have final say on cut and stuff like that. Nat Geo were very inspired by this and said that it had genuinely opened up conversations inside. I don't know honestly what that means about other stuff. We're talking to them about another film and they've already asked, what's the relationship with the community? So I think it is something people are becoming more aware of. But yeah, like I say, I don't think every film has to be like that. There's some that it's just, you know, it's just not the right model. And I go back to the finance point. Some films shouldn't be financed independently. Some films, it's great having a BBC commissioner. It's great having Channel 4 health and safety. It's great having people who keep you to a budget and a schedule. And in fact, that makes a better film. And in fact, I veer on the fact that a lot of ones that go independent end up not being finished, not being made, not having the money raised. And then the saddest thing that I get a lot is people emailing me saying, I've got this finished film. I used my money or my mum's money or my dad's money or someone's money to kind of cobble it together. What should I do with it now? And it's like, wow, that's like, it's really sad when someone's finished a film and there's no market for it. And it happens a lot. So you do have to be careful. Like I don't want to give just this like rosy picture. Like Alex and Will and all of us took a massive risk raising the money independently. And I felt confident in the fact of all the film pictures I've seen over 20 years, this was one of the ones that was going to be successful. And it was, but there's lots of other ones that I've bet on that have been wrong. Oh, there's a question, Danny.
Hi there, Lizzie. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I have like several questions, but I'll try not to be greedy. I wanted to ask broadly if it's speak a bit more about the process of bringing on those different equity investors and the different barriers and pushbacks you inevitably receive from them, and ultimately how you kind of overcame them to bring them on board. I'm sat here thinking that it's hard enough to bring on board film finances in general to top of the budget, let alone for a film where you're proactively saying from the outset that you want to do it completely, entirely independently. There's rightly so, a great participatory sort of aspect to it that means there's also a bit of a risk in terms of the filming style of it as well. And that you don't want to bring on a big funding source like a commissioner or an SPOD partner from the outset. Like how on earth do you go about convincing an equity investor that, yeah, please can we have your money?
Well, we were saying, here's our plan to make the film. We're going to show it to people later. You know, we were just saying we don't think that it's the right route to get it commissioned by Amazon or, you know, but, so I guess that's something that I've been building up in terms of, like, with Age of Stupid, we got ordinary people to put in from £500 upwards to the most someone put in was £35,000. So that was a kind of experiment in ordinary people investing in a film about climate change, and we paid them back a percentage of the profit. So it was equity investment, but it was called something else, and it was like on a really weird mass scale. So it was before Kickstarter even launched. There was no, what do they call it on Kickstarter? The kickers or the perks? I mean, there was actually, I think we gave people tickets to the premiere, we put their name in the credits, but essentially it was like, we need your money to make this film. If you can give us the money, we think we can make a really great film. Here's how we're going to try and distribute it. If we distribute it, you get a share of the profits, and we pay you back once a year for 10 years. And in the end, we paid back the people who invested at the beginning, got most of their money back, but because we saw the risk going down as time went on, the people who invested at the end, like if you invested £10,000 in the final round, you got the same amount of percentage of profits as if you put £500 in the first round. So those people who came in at the end hardly got any money back, is kind of where I'm going. So this is something I've been building up for a long time. That was like 15 or more years ago. And I love it. I love raising money in these weird ways because it's really powerful. You can also, it's really fun when you get the money. And I genuinely believe that where you get the money for a film dictates the creative. So, you know, if you make a film, like I made this other film last year, I finished it for Netflix. And it was based on a Financial Times article. And it was just a perfect Netflix film. Like I just saw it and thought, that's a Netflix film. Netflix wanted it, got the access, got the commission, made the film for Netflix. It's a really good Netflix film. It's not something like I had a burning desire to tell this story. You know, it was an impact film. Like there was I would never have done it if it wasn't for Netflix wanting it to be, you know, how it was. So going to your point specifically, Alex and Will had a brilliant proposition. They are very, very clever, and they always had compelling material. So they'd kind of got grants from all the best grant funders in the world, like Sundance, IDA, ITVS, Catapult. So as soon as I saw that on their application, I thought, wow, like they've literally got the stamp of approval of all these grant-making bodies. And so then when I talked to them, we hatched all these different plans, and we pitched loads of people. Like so many people said, oh, I love it, it's brilliant, like maybe come back when you've got a rough cut, you know, that was the general vibe. And we kind of decided that we had to turn the screws on the three people who were keenest. The biggest funder I found on LinkedIn and did a cold call. Sounds ridiculous, but they're called Luminate. And I think actually Will found them and said, there's this NGO, they fund films sometimes. We didn't know them from a bar of soap. I contacted them on LinkedIn, but bear in mind, it's quite a strong pitch when you're like, I'm Lizzie, it's passion. Like we won the Academy Award for Searching for Sugar Man. Darren Aronofsky's on board. We've got all the access, you know, we've got this impact campaign. I'm producing it. So it is quite a strong pitch. And then they were amazing. It was a year-long process, but they put in grant money, they put in equity money, and they allowed us to design the finance so that when they recouped all their equity investment and they got a huge chunk of profits, that went directly, automatically into the impact campaign. So we started the impact campaign with a big number, almost as big as the film budget, because of the way the finance was structured. So it was really, really innovative. And how did we get them all to do it? Well, we lined up these 3 equity investors, 150 each, and they all had to come in on the same terms on the same day. So it was like standard terms. They get their money back, then they get 20%, and then they get half of the profits after that. I think people could see a chance of getting their money back. You know, like the full equity position was only $500,000 US, and the market was pretty strong when we were talking to people. And yeah, I mean, this is what I do now for a job. So Merkel was $2 million budget, $1 million was equity, and $1 million was soft money. And there are equity financiers out there. It's just they want to invest in projects and people and companies that they feel safe with, because they're risking, you know, capital. And so it becomes that kind of cyclical thing. Having said that, it's really, really hard to raise money for films. That's kind of the thing people find hardest, I would say. But it's also, I think, kind of one of the funnest, because it unlocks everything.
We got a question from Jason.
Yes.
Yes. Hello. Hi, Lizzie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, super. Well, your funding story is amazing. It makes you wonder how many important films don't get made because of that struggle. So well done for persevering.
Thank you.
Well done for doing it your way, I guess. I think that some of the best films do actually come out of said struggle or passion. So many films that I think of that really they did them themselves, and then they came out at the end with a brilliant film. And then, but you're definitely right that there are those that go nowhere, either because there's no market or they're not good films. Love The Age of Stupid, by the way, groundbreaking stuff.
Oh, thank you.
I'm ashamed to say I haven't actually seen this film yet, but I've seen the trailers and promos many times.
Oh God, overkill.
It's interesting that this is essentially a people-based conservation film, but it's won at the big prizes at all the Wildlife Film Festivals so far, International Wildlife Film Festival, Jackson Wild, I think they're both of those, right?
Yeah, we won the Grand Teton, whatever that is, the Grand Teton.
Yes, the Grand Teton, that big mountain there. And so, you know, it's interesting, but again, because I haven't seen it, although I've seen lots of clips, I wonder how much of a wildlife or natural history film it actually is. So how would you categorize it? Would you say it is an environmental film, an activist film, an indigenous film? You know, where does it sort of, what's the sort of, obviously the people, the main focus, right? But how sort of holistic is it?
Well, I would say it's a documentary, do that really basically, and I guess its environmentalism is based around the statistics that Indigenous people, whilst only 5% of the world's population, manage and look after about 80% of the world's biodiversity. So it's kind of based around that. It's very immersive in that when you're in the forest, like the sound design tries to kind of capture the sounds and the insects, and there's lots of animals in it. But I don't see it as a natural history film. Not that I would have a problem with that. I guess I just don't feel any need to categorize it. I don't know.
Sure. No, I mean, for me, generally speaking, I would say that if I could list my favorite natural history films, they are ones with people in it. So you know, it's I think it's a really interesting balance, and often it is the people that draw people who aren't necessarily so much into what natural history that might, you know, that might draw them into being interested in certain environments because of the people. Anyway, that was my question. Thank you. I guess the other question would be, how hard was it to get the trust of that community how long did it take?
It took, well, because Alex went in with Nadine, who's been working with the community for decades, you know, that was obviously a head start. And in fact, I forgot to say, but it was actually the community's idea, the concept for the entire film, and that's why I say it is a deep co-production. So they said, everybody comes here, all the journalists from America, from England, come here, film us, they go away, nothing ever happens, nothing changes. And frankly, it's a waste of our time and it's pretty fucking boring. is what they said. And they said, why don't you go film with the settlers? Like, you're white, they're going to talk to you, you're American. They're the ones doing the violence, they're the one burning the rainforest, they're the one causing our problems. Why don't you go and film with them? So you haven't seen the film, but the whole film follows the two sides. So you've got the settlers and the loggers, and then you've got the indigenous community, and they're both kind of like basically driving towards a conflict over the Amazon, over this tiny little bit of the Amazon rainforest. And so it was their idea, their concept for the entire film. Can't remember what the question was now. Sorry.
It was just how long. Just how did you get
Oh,
next?
how
That's
long
what
did
you
it
pretty
take?
much answered it. Yeah.
Well, and it, you know, it took a while, like months, and then there was, when I came on board, which was 2 years in, there was this long kind of memorandum of understanding process, whereby the community and the filmmakers, everybody agreed that something should be formalized, but they're not really a written culture. So there was like a 5-day sit. I wasn't there, but it was like all the people from all the villages came, and over 5 days, they talked about what might happen if the film is really successful, what might happen if it's not finished, you know, would you be able to change stuff if you don't like it, like all the questions that people have. And that then there was some kind of, I don't even know if it was, like, we had a written agreement, which Alex and Will talked through with the community, and people felt that that was important. But from what I understand, an agreement is kind of always moving and shifting. So you have to, it's like a relationship, like the agreement is as good as your word. And so even when it came to distributing the film, you know, not only did we want to involve the community and have them at all the events and you know, really have them involved in the film, we had to, because otherwise they could kind of withdraw their consent and their blessing. And in fact, the big strand of the Impact campaign now is this huge kind of roving film festival, of which the Territory is the main film, going right across the Amazon and all across Brazil. And they've got other films as well. And they're trying to take the film to farmer communities, settler communities, indigenous communities, all sorts of communities, and kind of have conversation about these things.
So interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. If we had Yvonne, but also Lena, and Lena, you've not asked a question yet, so if you want to go ahead, we'll come back to you, Yvonne.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Lizzie, and thanks for sharing all this with us. It's really refreshing to hear. And I think I'm assuming that a lot of us, not just in this room, but in FFW, want to make this kind of film that are impact driven. But as you've already discussed, the funding models are a constraint, and they dictate the editorial decisions that get made. So I'm wondering, what's your vision for the future of impact filmmaking, if impact is to start at the development stage? Because I'm aware that there are different models, and that's something I'm really thinking about. Is it better to work with broadcasters and streamers, and I know that they've put out commitments to be more impact driven, and at the same time, if you're saying based on your experience that it's better to target the funders that are going to have a vision aligned with yours, then even if it sounds like a lot of work, it took you a year, and it requires a lot of privilege already if you're going to do work unpaid, and then or incredible organizational skills to do other work, etc. So I'd be curious to know what, especially as you mentioned being an activist as well, so feel free to talk about systems change. I'm very
wow, that's very cool. That's a very good question. I guess everybody has their own journey on this stuff, and everybody has their own theory of change, and I've been through all sorts of iterations. And first I was a kind of filmmaker, and then I was an activist, and I thought the activism was more important, and I only wanted to do like activist stuff. And where I've ended up myself, and this is just my own personal opinion, is that the biggest impact you can have as a creative person in film is to make the absolute best films that have something social or political to say about the world. So my feeling, the reason I joined this company, Passion Pictures, 5 years ago, was that I had been making these impact films and working in this kind of very niche impact kind of campaigny space. And I was starting to kind of question and get cynical about the real genuine impact that that work was having. And what I saw was that some films like Hillsborough, there's a really famous passion film called Hillsborough about the disaster, you know, where the crowd got crushed, and about police corruption and cover up. And it was seen by, it doesn't sound like that many people, but it was like 1 million people watched it live on a Sunday night, and it ignited the airwaves. And it's a really brilliant film. And I thought I would actually rather do that, like make a really big mainstream film that has something political to say. So I would say that Navalny, you know, that won the Oscar, that's a really political film. It's also a really commercially successful film. And that's personally where I try and sit, like make big global commercial films that have some impact in them. Having said that, there's lots of amazing small films that get made for $30, $40, $50, $100,000, $200,000 that really do touch people and have a profound impact. And it's kind of where you're at in your journey. I mean, I made a film here at Passion called Lady Boss, the Jackie Collins story. And people, like, when I started it, they were like looking at me, you did Age of Stupid. Like, why would you do Lady Boss? Like, one of the funders said to me and the director, why would two smart and political girls like you want to do a film about Jackie Collins? And it's like, fucking exactly for that reason, because she was a strong, powerful, sexy businesswoman who was also flawed and vulnerable. And we were able to make a film that reached millions of people, really commercial, but it has something deeply political to say about the way women are treated in society, and about misogyny, and about the fact that women can be lots of things. You can be really flawed, really vulnerable, really strong, really successful, all these different things. And it's actually one of the films I'm proudest of. So that's kind of my take on it. But you should I think every person should find like their own theory of change, and like what you think has impact in the world, what gives you joy. Because I don't really believe in people who kind of do work that makes them miserable and justify that on social justice grounds. Because I think, like, be the change you want to see. It sounds so cheesy, but like, be the change you want to see in the world, and make films that you love and that you're passionate about and that bring you joy, and try and make some work that has something to say. That's for me. I'm not telling you what to do. Sorry, bit of a rant.
That was great. Thank you so much.
We've got only about 7 minutes left before we wrap up, and we've got 4 hands up. So
we've got 2 in the chat as well. But
in the chat,
and
you're all coming at the end. Let's just go through. Sorry, Yvonne, I'll leave you just back one, just because try and get through other people. So Archie, and then Christina, and then do you want to do 2 of the chat ones there, Louisa?
Yes, I think one's already slightly been answered, but yes, that sounds good if we have time.
Hi, Archie. Hey.
Hi, how's it going? I mean, we touched on like collaboration and stuff before. Do you think the film would have been what it was without COVID? And do you think it would have been as collaborative as it became?
No,
like,
definitely
I mean,
not.
you said you came in 2 years in. I'm not sure if that was like what point that was, but obviously, was that before you gave them the cameras?
It was already, they were just starting. They were just kind of panicked. It was about June 2020. So COVID had hit, but it wasn't the burning season. And they weren't sure what they were going to do. They weren't sure if they were going to be able to go or not. I think they did go to Brazil, but they weren't allowed to go near the indigenous territory. So it kind of was all evolving. No, I don't think it would have been as collaborative, you know, if it wasn't for COVID. Weird that COVID was kind of partly the making of the film, because, you know, if you've seen it, that visceral power of the filming the indigenous cinematographer Tanguy did is really amazing and adds so much to it. And I don't think Alex would have got that. Having said that, Alex's filming throughout lots of the other parts of the film is really beautiful. And, you know, he's been working for a very long time. He's Matt Heineman's DOP. He shot The First Wave, and lots of other really good documentaries. So I think it's that kind of combination. It was the perfect storm, that film. Like, everything came together and each person brought their own skills. I've never had an experience like it in my life, honestly.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Dean?
Thank you. Hi, Lizzie. Thanks so much for doing this for us. It's super interesting and useful. Most of my questions have been asked actually already, but there was one, I've thought about it before when thinking about trying to do something in collaboration, and that idea of informed consent.
Sorry, just got a low battery.
No worries.
Warning.
And that's obviously more difficult in some situations than others. And I know there was a mention of it being a non-verbal version. I just wondered if you'd be happy talking a bit more about that.
I think Alex and Will realize, sorry, I'm just trying to plug this in. Yes. They realized that you can't really expect informed consent from a community who don't. I'm so embarrassed. I'm wearing a Nat Geo jumper. That was like, I went to the gym and I've got no other clothes. It's really embarrassing. I'm sorry. And the cleaner's here. I'm going to get chucked out in a minute. I'm at the office. Just give me 2 minutes. I'm not closing up. I'm too scared. I'm going to lock the building. Sorry. Informed consent. They basically realized you can't expect a community to give informed consent if they don't know what film is. So that was the participatory filmmaking. That was really making sure that they understood what they were consenting to as far as was possible. So it was really about a continual conversation. And even on the road with the film, film festivals, sometimes they wanted to come, sometimes they didn't want to come. And that's part of informed consent as well. And being involved or not involved in all of the press stuff and the awards events. It was a huge amount of work for those Indigenous community members who came. I think Bitate was probably away 7 months of last year, the main guy in the film, promoting the film essentially. And that has its own complications because it's not great for a community if the community leader is away promoting a film. And, also the money, of course, it's great that they got the money, but that has its own complications too. How do you manage the money? Who's in charge of the money? What do they do with the money? Like, it's all really complicated. Okay, one last question.
Eloise, do you want to read one out from the chat from someone who hasn't?
I think that they have, one has
pretty much answered.
Been asked. I think so, Toby. I think that Archie's question sort of slightly, because it was about Alex, your communications with Alex and when you joined the project and things like that. So, and the other was about, it was about it was about the Indigenous community as well, which I think you've talked about quite your communications with them as well.
Yvonne's had a hand up for a long time for the second question. Go on, hit it.
Yeah, so maybe it will be a good closing question actually, but I'm wondering, now that you're like this far in advance and seeing everything that has happened, what is something that you wish you knew when you started this project?
I wish I knew it would be successful and that we would finish it, because honestly there was a whole year where it was just me, Alex and Will on these weekly Zooms. They were the ones doing the work, but I was like, each week zooming in from passion, and I'd be like, shit, what are we going to do? No one wants to put money in. Like, okay, what about this? What about that? And I started to just kind of lose the will, like I always believed in them and I always knew it could be successful. But I must admit, somewhere inside me, there was a certain point where I was thinking, is this ever going to be anything? Is this ever going to be finished? And I wish I knew. I mean, not that it would have really made any difference. And, right up until the week before we got into Sundance, we were like, shit, what are we going to do? How are we going to get the last bit of money? And then Alex said, what if we get into Sundance? I was like, well, that's not going to happen. And also, we're not going to be ready. It was manic, but it was awesome. Like, it's been honestly the biggest privilege of my whole life, just being a very small part of this amazing film. And I've never met such a group of clever, committed, seriously talented people right across the board. And good people attract good people, and that's been such a pleasure right from the beginning to the end. I just want to make it sure everybody knows I'm a very, very small part of a big, diverse team, and I'm really thrilled to be part of it. But I want everyone to know that I wasn't on the ground, like not taking any kind of credit for stuff I didn't do.
And just as a follow-up, would you say then that Sundance was your game changer? Because it seems like you have like this road of like, I'll do that, and then it happened. What was that like?
Yeah, this was a big deal for me personally. It's the first time I've seen what an Oscar campaign looks like from the inside, which is pretty fucking cool and pretty awesome when you get close. Like, we were shortlisted, so we were down to the final 15, and the word on the street is we were very close to being nominated. Would have been amazing, would have been so great, of course, but just to see how it all works and see what's needed and see what all the different awards mean, and the press campaign, and just having, for me, honestly, it's like all of that work just meant more people saw the film. You guys on this call only know about the film because Nat Geo put, you know, and us put so much time and effort and resource, and not many films get that much time once they're finished. You know, if you've done a broadcast film, normally you deliver it and you finish and that's it. It goes out or it lives on the platform and you tell your friends about it, you do a TX card, you put it up on social media, and that's it, you know. So for me, the way I do my films is about a third of the work is development and finance, a third of the work is production, and a third of the work is distribution, release, festivals, awards. And as a producer, I just have to know that, you know, it's about a year of each. But it's a joyful thing because then people watch your bloody film that you spent so long working on, and people like you know about it, and you wouldn't have known about it, you know. And if that film was bought by BBC Storyville, I bet you most of you wouldn't have heard of it and you wouldn't be on here now. And that's all I care about, is that people watch the film, that it has an impact on them, and that it has some kind of impact in the world. So yeah, it's been an amazing experience, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. What great questions. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lizzie. Sorry, Danny, we didn't have time for your last question.
No worries.
Yeah, thank you, Lizzie, and everyone for attending. It's been brilliant to host this. Lizzie, I know you've got a dash.
I've got a dash.
Eloise.
I'll leave you guys on, but really nice to meet you all, and I'm on social media. You can connect with me there.